Welcome to the No Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
And my name is Joe Augustin. Welcome to a show that tries to make sense of the world that is increasingly not making sense. We also try to cover a lot of stuff that may not get covered. I mean, there's a lot of stuff right now in the news, but there's also some stuff that maybe isn't at the forefront, and there's a greater dimension to things as well. Now, the other thing that we try to do is we try to have a diverse point of view, a diverse perspective as well. And that's why we bring on our guests. So our guest today is Michael Chua. He's a cybersecurity and digital technology consultant who has served banks, big tech, and governments in 19 countries across 4 continents over the last 20 years. But even more interesting is Michael is an award-winning writer, producer, director, and actor, appearing in more than 400 productions. He's also the author of the novel Made in Singapore, as in made, as in helper. Summary of our last show. Okay, well, let's see what happened previously as well. First of all, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so Neil Mann recommended you, so you're obviously friends with him. He was a guest late last year. He was great. You know Neil, obviously in the same sort of space.
Oh, Neil,
tech,
yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah. So, okay, you got to tell us about this acting side.
Well, I was talent scouted very late in my age, actually. I was an independent cybersecurity consultant. In those days, you have to physically travel to the client sites and live there actually for 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, and so on. So overall, I did about 19 countries, 20 years across 4 continents. And that was quite tiring. So I came back here to do the same thing here. But the market here is smaller, much smaller. And in the meantime, I got talent scouted to become an actor. And when I went to the audition and rehearsals, the director was very generous with her compliments about how I should take up acting professionally because I was good. And not knowing any better, I believe her. If she had said that my acting totally sucks, please give up and die, I wouldn't have blamed her because I didn't know what was what. Then I went on and it was quite true. I was very lucky. I got a lot of gigs and I was like busy every week acting, and by the 5th film it got the best actor, best film, and it went viral. The film was called Hentak Kaki and it resonated very well with national servicemen here. Yeah, that was the starting of getting more gigs and more interesting stuff coming.
Cool.
So to date, I've done about 15 years of that and 400 over productions. Yeah.
And still working in cybersecurity.
Still working everything together. Still teaching. Still working in cybersecurity. Yeah.
And if anyone's looking for a movie or a TV series idea, your book Made in Singapore is also up for option, right?
Yes. There's a story about impoverished Filipina escaping from a sleazy entertainment circuit by becoming a maid and working herself secretly to become an online celebrity until her cover was blown. So that story covers a lot of unwritten rules in Singapore between maids and everybody else. Like in some places, I heard maids are not allowed in the swimming pool, or security guards are not allowed to date maids even during the weekends. If they are found out, they'll be fired, things like that. So I weave a lot of such small stories together and make it a comedy so that we can all laugh about it rather than moan about it.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. Because as an Australian moving to Singapore, the whole maid culture was obviously something that was really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And talking to the girls as well and understanding, just not being able to swim. I'm like, why not?
Yeah.
So some of the crazy rules. I don't even know if it's still the same anymore, if it's changed, but yeah, some of it shocked me.
There have been a lot of complaints against such unfair practices, and some clubs, particularly those high-class clubs, they used to forbid maids to do this and that, but they have stopped. But also maids tend to be timid, and they would then refrain from causing any embarrassment to the employer, and they don't swim. Or if they do swim, is to take care of that little Johnny so that he wouldn't drown or something. In my condo, there are some foreign workers, as in Indian construction workers, and they live in the condo because the boss has a unit there. And they tend not to use the swimming pool as well. They don't even sit around the swimming pool. They sit at the car park on the curb, playing with their phone. So I don't understand. In a way, it is also their habit, partly their habit. I don't think my condo has a rule that workers or maids cannot use the pool. No such rule, but they kind of refrain from it anyway, strangely. I'm yet to confront any one of them to ask why.
Yeah, I think
probably just in case, right? I mean, I think these kinds of things happen when somebody makes a complaint, somebody makes a thing and makes a bit of noise, and I think when they hear about something adjacent happening, they might go like, okay, well, there's no,
I think so, yes.
No need to push it. Yeah,
I think for people outside of this region, they might find the whole thing a bit weird. I still find it weird after more than 20 years living in Asia, but anyway. So Michael, it's really great to have you. We're really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say, and obviously sitting in the cybersecurity space, that's a really important part of the overall discussion. And we had Jessica Figueres last week, 2 weeks ago, who's also a cybersecurity expert. So that was an interesting take, wasn't it, Joe? Yeah.
Well, I mean, someone living on the inside of the UK situation, someone who has, well, I wouldn't say had been, but actually is sort of in politics, but having a changing role over time. Nice to have someone's perspective like that.
Yeah.
And I know Michael comes today with a little bit of apprehension as well as to what we're going to try to get him to talk about. You know what, Michael? It's really quite simple. We try to bring people on who might have something to say about life in general and people, right? So when you write a book like Made in Singapore, for instance, you're looking at the stories of the world, and I think we can always find the stories of the greater world as well and figure out what's going on. There's a kind of a story that's unveiling. We're not looking to figure out what conspiracies may lie, but we try to look at what could be behind some of the bigger stories and some of the details as well that perhaps I guess the general public don't have their eye on. I mean, I know that even though I do this show with Andrea every 2 weeks, I'm not as up to date as when I'm preparing for this show. I don't get to become abreast of things until I have a look at the notes as we're getting ready for the show. So this is by no means meant to be a normal sort of list of subjects, but as far as reactions go, please feel free to come to speak from the heart and whatever comes to mind. You know,
that's a good way of describing it, Joe. Yeah. All right. So since we started the show back just after Chinese New Year, we've really focused in on what's happening in the US because, of course, it ripples out and consumes the world. So every week we've been talking about that. My first weekend reads, which I did in January, was titled "We Are Suffering from a Failure of Imagination," and that's why the title today, the theme today, is "Are We Imagining Enough Yet?" And this is really sort of going as far as the possibilities of this moment in time can take us. And I sent a quote out from a Hungarian journalist who said that he suffered a failure of imagination as they became an authoritarian state, right, as a country. So failure of imagination to me is a really big issue at this time. And I know a lot of people don't want to confront it or even think about, where we could go. But for me personally, I am naturally inclined to do that because if I know, then I can prepare, whether it's making sure my family's safe or the community's safe or whatever I think I need to do. So when we look back at the last couple of weeks, we're doing this every 2 weeks now. Joe, what was your biggest moment in the news in the last couple of weeks? What's your biggest takeaway or shock?
Well, I mean, look, there's so many to choose from, right? But I was just thinking about what has been coming back to me over and over again, and it's that meeting that Zelensky had. I mean, it's supposed to be a photo opportunity, before a press conference, and basically comments break out. It's egos are pushed on, and then a smart, witty guy pushes back in real time. And but I'm talking about, of course, the Zelensky and Trump mishap in the Oval Office. But the more and more I look at the thing now, I'm thinking to myself, it really looked like it was almost a setup, in terms of who was there and who was ready to do what, and to have ridiculous things in a moment like that, where a reporter, drops in the question like, why don't you wear a suit, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I was just so far out of left field. And really, in terms of writing, I love what Zelensky came back with, right? He said, maybe next time I'll come back with a suit, something better than what you. I mean, he essentially said something. He managed to drop some sass in the reporter as well. I'll come back with a suit and maybe better than yours,
When the
right?
war's
Kind
over.
of
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that was the thing, and how it basically crumbled from a situation which was supposed to be, it was Zelensky coming in to try to solve a problem, and he took the bait in a way which he'd been warned about. Actually, he'd been advised. I think somebody in the Trump administration actually had told him, "Don't take the bait," and unfortunately, he did. And there's a problem when you can appear to be too smart, and he was unwilling to not be too smart.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like a lot of the criticism was towards him.
Yeah.
First of all, speaking third language, fourth language, whatever English is for him. But that moment of he looked stunned when it first started. He looked really, really shocked, and
Yeah.
I think every one of us has been ambushed in a situation, in a meeting, or within families or whatever. And you can look after the fact and say, I wish I behaved in a different way. But I think that moment, I think that was when his emotions kicked in, and he sort of he's so conciliatory afterwards, right? Not Trump, but he is. But yeah, no, it was a stunning moment. I'm going to reference a couple of things. Michael, what's been your moment in the last couple of weeks? The same?
Well, you can't run away from that meeting. Everybody is talking about it. Yeah, I don't know what to make out of it. I just wish that peace will come, because then, I'm not saying that you should take up Trump's offer or anything, but I hope peace will come, because it seems that we are dangerously moving towards World War III. That's what I'm afraid of, because if the France and Britain moves into Ukraine in terms of foot soldiers, then I think there's a risk of World War III, which I hope it wouldn't happen. It's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I felt the same. That moment really upset me. I just felt this moment of how dare they, two men who have never, been in a situation like Zelensky's been in, and we know that it sent shockwaves around the world, and it's definitely a defining moment in history, and it will be talked about in history for years to come. But there's a couple of things that have caught my attention. One was the former Polish prime minister, I think, or leader. He's called Lech Walesa. I can't say his name right. And he won the Nobel Prize for pro-democracy efforts when, in the dissolution of the USSR, right? And he's
Lech
also
Walensky.
No, it Walesa, but it's got accents on two of the letters that I don't know how to pronounce those accents. Yeah. Anyway, so he first of all posted this big long statement on Facebook, and that's where the media caught it, and it started becoming news. So him and three other former Polish political prisoners who were all held during the communist era basically signed a letter that they sent to Donald Trump, expressing horror and distaste at his argument with the Ukrainian president. He said Trump and his vice president's demands that Zelensky showed gratitude were insulting in the face of Ukrainian country's fight for freedom. The atmosphere in the Oval Office reminded us of that which we remember well from interrogations by Poland's communist secret services and regime courts. The prosecutors and the judges working on behalf of the omnipotent Communist Party police also told us they held all the cards and we held none. We are shocked that you treated Zelensky in the same way. So, we're seeing lots of experts on interrogation, international interrogation, body language experts who are discussing this moment too. But I thought that real sort of emotional response from someone who's actually experienced interrogation and heard those same words used in that context, I thought was very an interesting take. The other thing was, we heard that the US has stopped sharing intelligence and stopped with sending weapons and any financial support. Well, apparently both of these things were decided before the White House meeting. So not everyone sort of knows that.
Mm.
And then to top it off, something also that was decided before the White House meeting, but is only just coming out in the press, Trump is considering revoking all visa statuses for Ukrainians, and there's 240,000 Ukrainians in the US with temporary visas who've basically fled the conflict. So that's another story that's starting to emerge. Across the board, US has become an authoritarian state by all accounts. Its leaders are spewing Russian propaganda. Its friends are now enemies. I'm very impressed with Canada. Although when you look at the way Mexico is responding, because Mexico doesn't have as much power as Canada, like Mexico will be crushed by what's going on. The foreign minister of Canada was just saying, we've got everything we need to survive as a nation. We've got energy, we've got potash, we've got agriculture, we've got everything we need. Whereas Mexico's in a very, very different position. But I think Claudia Steinbaum is she's playing politics the right way for her country, and Canada's playing it the right way for their country. All of the alliances that we've known for 80 years are on the line. So it certainly makes for interesting times. Any thoughts on any of those ones?
Well, I mean, the situation that Canada is in is it's quite amazing. But actually, what I thought about was not so much what the other countries were, what the situation that those countries were in. I was actually much more concerned, if you like, well, what was happening in the U.S., as in what all this would mean for the U.S. Because the repercussions of the things that were being taxed and all the different things that come from Canada, for instance. I mean, for me, my perspective is I knew more about what was happening in Canada because Canada had done a lot more in terms of publishing content. They're all talking about what they were doing, right? What they were doing as retaliation. In what while they were saying that we want to solve this problem, but while that happens, this is what we're going to do as well. And Americans are going to really, really get a terrible, terrible outcome from all of this, given what they were coming from. As in, they voted Trump in, running away from a situation that they somehow believed Biden had created. And it's about to get worse. It literally is about to get worse because I mean, some of the things that they talked about, for instance, I think there's even a Dodge truck. It's an American brand, right? It's a Dodge truck. It's made in Canada. It's going to go up from if I'm an $80,000 truck becomes a $100,000 truck. It's not as it's no small thing that this is happening. And the worst thing about this is the other side of it just doesn't make sense, as in where it's supposed to go can't happen based on what the economists are doing. But the economists look at the ideas, right, and say, like, if the tariffs do work, you're going to have either of either situation happen, right? You're going to either get your income from the additional tariffs, right, which means that the income goes up. But what it would mean if the income does go up is that the tariffs themselves as protection for the U.S. industry hasn't worked, because if the tariffs go up, it means that the U.S. continue to consume all these things, and therefore the businesses were not protected, and therefore it's still outflows, right? So it's either going to go one way or the other. You're going to get the outflows stemmed, in which case revenues drop, or the opposite. So it's not even a thing where if you hold your position you're going to be fine, right? It is just not tenable, as in, like, there's no win from doing that. The idea that you can all you can do is have less. All you can do, everybody in the equation has to have less because of this one thing, and the only thing that you win on is the fact that you had your way. That's the problem with this particular situation.
Although maybe the reduced consumption is good for the environment, right? So maybe that's the win.
That's an upside. An upside.
Michael, your thoughts?
Well, tariffs usually doesn't work. In the end, things will cost more. There'll be inflation. People will also consume less. I don't know whether his tariff will result in more factories being open in US instead of Canada versus also Mexican factories moving to US. That's his plan. But I think factories don't move so easily.
No.
There's a lot of consideration. So
Yeah.
Cost of living will go up with tariffs. That's clear.
Yeah, exactly. So there was the Doge story. They interviewed a car. I think they called him an OEM. Did you see that on Fox News? Did you see that, Joe, or did you just hear about it? Right, and it went back to the Fox News host, and she started going a little bit nuts. And she was talking about, well, do the Europeans drive Doge cars? And you just kind of want to say to her, mate, have you seen European roads? They don't have roads big enough for American cars. What are you talking about? It's interesting. So another big, like we're watching the leaders of countries being as diplomatic as they possibly can, which of course is what is required of this time. But there was one politician in France. His name was Claude Malouret. And again, I'm sure I'm saying it all wrong. And he was the one that I referenced when I said that Elon Musk was a jester high on ketamine and compared Donald Trump to Nero. So he said, Washington has become Nero's court with an incendiary emperor, submissive courtiers, and we certainly saw at the State of the Nation, and a jester high on ketamine in charge of purging the civil service. So he's the leader of the centre-right party. It's called the Independents. And he said, we were at war with a dictator, and now we are at war with a dictator backed by a traitor. So that's one of the voices that's coming out of Europe. I thought it was interesting. We're going to talk about ketamine later if we have time.
Okay.
Yeah, and obviously, when I'm kind of watching all of this, as Joe knows, I'm always watching it through the lens of the climate. And, I've often asked the question, is totalitarianism, authoritarianism inevitable in the time that we're in? Because no matter what, we're going to go through hard times. And when you look at the history of sort of authoritarian movements, it's always when we're in hard times. So it does feel inevitable. But the big thing for me is obviously watching the continual cutbacks on climate science research, meteorologists. The cuts at NOAA are horrific for all of us. But Donald Trump announced that they're going to expand tree cutting in national parks and state land, 113 million hectares. And that's obviously because a lot of the timber comes from Canada. But in Antarctica, sea ice has fallen to near record lows, and the scientists are saying it's now gone through a structural change. So that means it's not going to come back again. That's a permanent change. And then just today in the Times is an article which is very focused on the UK, and it says, we've failed to stop climate change. This is what we need to do next. So I think at this time, let's be inspired by Bernie Sanders, who I said a couple of weeks ago wasn't inspiring me much, but I think he's gotten a little bit better. And he said, at this particular moment in history, despair is not an option. Giving up is not acceptable. And none of us have the privilege of hiding under the covers. And that's another reason why we do this show. We've got David. We love you too. That's why we do this show, because we're not hiding under the covers. We're trying to get out there and just try and help people understand this time. So, yeah, it's a big time.
Yeah, I like this thing about being able to step forward and to come up and do something. This is the tough part, because I think the sense that you can't do anything is very strong, right? I mean, this is it's one of those things when you reduce it, you go like, how can I do anything? What can I do? And sometimes being self-protective, and this is what I fear about the moment, is that we're in this mode where we're trying to look after ourselves, and we spend time looking after ourselves. And that's what Europe went through during the Second World War, as people began to try to figure out how to deal with the big problems, and they just looked after themselves. And after a while, they had no choice anyway. They had to step up and do something about what was going on. So the big question, of course, is what is the big thing you can choose to do, right? I mean, you can choose to sometimes, if you look at what the French were able to do, and they're always made fun of, for what they chose to do during the Second World War. But at the same time, you also have that result of that, right? The result of kind of giving in and staying out of the way and just saying, okay, let's just play cool. French culture has had its day. It survived through the Second World War. Its monuments remained in place. The art remained where it was. All those different things happened at the same time. So that, to me, it always has this nagging kind of question. It's like, yes, the obvious answer seems to be we have to fight back, and then I think about the French, what they did, what they managed, and I go like, I don't really know the answer, but I know that what the danger is we come out of that and say, therefore, we don't do anything. We have to act. We have to choose to do something, and then we have to follow that plan through. It needs to be more than just an accident. It needs to be more than just what happened because I wasn't in charge. This is just what happened.
Are we talking about the climate, or are we talking about geopolitics? So it depends on well, that's to me I find there's very little I can do, honestly. I mean, I listen to the news or listen to social media, and that's about it. What else can I do? I don't think I'm of that kind of material to set up an activism group or otherwise. I don't think so. So personally, I don't think I can do much.
Yeah, so I take on the role of educator, I suppose, with what I do with my weekend reads, with what we're doing here today. Speaking up, trying to help people understand. The other thing I really want to help people understand is that you can't hide from this moment. It's going to impact all of us, right? And we're here in Singapore. I think in Singapore, that the government's going to do the right thing by its people, right? Because it will. And a lot of other parts of the world who are not. So I mean, in Europe and the Northern Hemisphere, that's where the real action is taking place right now. But yeah, speaking up, educating, activism, I think it's a very challenging thing to do in this region. It's just not culturally the way to do it, but you can influence within your own families, your own communities, where your real power lies. Obviously, voting matters in democracies around the world. The strong man is rising. I think 70% of the world's governments now are not democracies, so democracy's waning. But the strong man, I keep thinking, there's two paths here. We've got the strong man that we're seeing coming out of the US or Russia, or we've got the benevolent dictator as the other potential path. So I just keep thinking, we need a Lee Kuan Yew on the global stage now to get everyone into line and smack them around their head and point everyone in the right direction where the majority can flourish, right? But when we look at Ukraine, so one of the podcasts I try and listen to is called The Rest is Politics. Have either of you ever listened to it?
No, not yet.
No, it's a really good one. If you want to... so they did a podcast pretty quickly after the Zelensky meeting. Both of them have been in politics on both sides. So also Anthony Scaramucci and Katie Couric also do The Rest is Politics. So there's two pairs. But they did one and they were discussing the 5 options that Ukraine has now. So number 1 is Ukraine fights alone. And if that happens, obviously they're not going to make it. Number 2 is European troops intervene without US backing, and that's obviously where we are at the moment. It's a high risk move. Obviously, could embarrass Europe if they fail. And, like Jess said last week, Europe is not one homogenous unit. It's 26 different countries, right? A US-backed security guarantee, which is obviously in the White House, that meeting with Zelensky, that's what the US was saying they weren't offering. Trump accepts Putin's terms. And if Trump brokers the deal, that's obviously the likely scenario. So Putin gets to keep what it's taken, and basically Ukraine receives nothing. So that was 4, not 5, right? Yeah. So basically, the bottom line they're saying is supporting Ukraine now prevents a bigger war and keeps the fight away from NATO territory. So my understanding from that comment is NATO soldiers could go into Ukraine, but it's if the war moves into NATO territory that the articles are enacted and World War III starts. So if Ukraine falls, Europe faces a much stronger Russia, a direct military threat, and higher long-term costs. So my takeaway from that is I don't know if we're really grasping why it's important to get this under control in Ukraine and stop it there before it actually expands. I mean, what do you think?
I think the NATO troops moving into Ukraine is the beginning of World War III. I'm sorry, Russia is not going to wait for things to develop further. That is going to be so scary if that happens. And actually, without the US support, the European Air Force is relatively weak. The US, for example, has only about 100 F-35 and Typhoons. I mean, just to give you a comparison, India has about 496 to 558 fighters, aircrafts. So UK itself is already a much reduced military size already. I haven't checked France, but I believe France isn't as big as they used to be. So together, I don't think they can defeat Russia, which has the biggest nuclear arsenal in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
But the French and British nuclear arsenals are a lot more modern. But then you've also got countries like Finland, Sweden, Poland, and they've got much more military capability just because they've never taken their eye off their neighbor, right?
Well, they are relatively small. I mean, the whole population of Norway is only 5 million. So let's be realistic. I think if NATO troops lands in Ukraine, I think I'll be very worried. I'll be really worried. Yeah.
But I mean, we were talking before the show. So one of my it's a hard thing to talk about, right? When we go back and look at hindsight and wars, there's so many points in the build up to a war where we think, why didn't we stop then? Why didn't they do this then? And we can't, we don't have hindsight about what's going to happen next. But the feeling that whatever it takes to get this stopped, and obviously peace is the best path forward, but peace without security doesn't sound like a path forward. Because I want to share just some other points that they made, and they're basically saying why the fighting has to stop in Ukraine before it spreads out to Europe, where it's going to be much worse. So the first is they're saying that Ukraine provides a buffer zone against Russia, and if Ukraine falls, Russia would gain a direct border with NATO members like Poland, Slovakia, and Romania. So that increases further risk of further aggression. Avoiding a risk of larger future war. So if they conquer Ukraine, it won't stop there. That's the message. He's already threatened to go into Moldova, the Baltics, and Poland. So basically, if you stop them in the territory before they go out onto these NATO countries, that's when it's Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which means World War III. Ukraine actually has massive military strength, and if Russia takes them over, that military strength then becomes part of Russia's military strength, and it's an experienced army. It's got whatever weapons in the country that have been provided to it, but then Ukrainian troops could actually turn and become the aggressors towards the rest of Europe. So that's obviously a risk. preventing Russia's military expansion. So that sort of goes on to there. So it's not just the military, it's the industry and the economy. It will make Russia stronger in future wars. Obviously, economic and political stability in Europe are on the line. So massive refugee waves of Ukrainians getting out, disruptions to European energy and food security, and Russia will have more leverage. There's a lot of talk about deterring China and other authoritarian states like Iran. I'm not as bought into that. A cheaper option for Europe than war on NATO territory, so that's important. And the final one is preserving international law and European values. But when I was listening to it, that real message of it whatever happens, once it spills over Ukrainians' borders into its neighbours, which are NATO countries, that's when we're in real trouble.
I think what should be done now is to go back to the negotiating table and make Ukraine a neutral state, and then have a supervisory level to ensure that Ukraine remain a neutral state. And I think that will stop Russia from crossing that buffer state. I feel that is the best situation, so that the war stops, people stop dying, and we don't have the risk of walking into World War III. If the leaders of France and Britain is foolish enough to send troops into Ukraine, I think war will start, will escalate, will expand. And then there'll be an excuse to go into Poland. Right? It will spread. I don't think they'll be good.
No, I'm with you. But at the moment, like, Russia's weaker than it's ever been, right? It's 3 years of war.
Actually, you see, for that, we don't really know, okay? We don't really know whether Russia is weaker as it already has been, right? We don't know. This is second-hand news. We don't know whether what state they are in.
Yeah, right? I'm gonna jump in there and say, actually, we do know, because we do know that essentially this great aggressor has tried to invade a country and been repelled. Yes, with the help of
together with US and European weapons and all that. Without NATO, Ukraine would have been fallen in 3 days, 2 weeks.
But right?
So and I agree with you on that, and that of course, again, like I said, it should have been a protracted war, maybe for a while. But if you look at the stuff that was happening along the way, right, there were lots and lots of times when Ukraine was literally without resources and it was weak. And even in those times, Russia wasn't able to capitalize on that. So for me, that has evidence that says that, you know what, in these times of weakness, even in short weakness, that Russia was unable to capitalize on that. That really tells me something about it. Now, of course, look, I'm not the geopolitical expert on things. But I will say that there's a I mean, when Trump said what he said, gambling with World War III, I think it's because he is privy to one essential thing, as in what he wants to do and what he doesn't want to do, right? And in all the modeling that's been done, I think it's been said, you know what, this what you've described just now has to happen, otherwise World War III, or otherwise the engagement of World War III. And I think he is unwilling, and he just knows he's not going to do the thing that he has to do. Because the missing thing in all of that is that first thing that the U.S. can do. The U.S. can intervene and really make a huge difference. So what they want to do, the desired outcome seems to be right now, is exactly that. Let's not fight over Ukraine. Let's divide Ukraine, right? Let's us take what we want. Let's you take what you want, and let's not have this problem. That's the short-term deal that they have, and that's why they're rushing to that. But I am very much with Andrea on this, in terms of Russia is currently weak. It is.
It doesn't show in the economic numbers. The economic numbers is still very healthy. That's despite the Nord Stream being blown up, and there's sanctions placed on Russian and their oligarchs. So how come, despite all this, despite the war, despite the prolonged war, the economic factors, the numbers are still good?
Defense spending.
So, wow. I think we have to be more careful with assuming that Russia is weak. My personal opinion is that we don't know. And if we look at both sides, who to believe?
Yeah. Russia's holding on to some very large, blunt instruments, and that is completely true. As in, like, nuclear weapons are not to be trifled with. I mean, that is fundamentally the thing that they have. Is whether or not they have the strength in other areas, they have these really, really blunt objects that can make a big difference, right? So, in terms of
you see, so many countries fighting against Russia and they cannot win, and you say that Russia is weak. I think I beg to differ. This is logic, not based on second-hand information or first-hand information. This is based on logic. So how can Russia be weak if it can withstand the attack of so many countries?
Who's on the ground in the Ukraine right now for Russia?
I don't have first-hand information. I know that Russia is fighting with Ukrainians, with NATO equipment, and some say mercenaries from the West, but that one is hearsay, right? So it is a number of countries fighting against Russia. Otherwise, Ukraine would have fallen in 3 days or 2 weeks. So I don't think it's fair to say that Russia is weak now. I don't see that logic coming.
But I mean, it just you're at a full scale war for 3 years. You're going to be weaker than when you started. So one of the estimates is that they've lost 839,000 troops, and the way that they're proving those numbers is because they're counting new graves, across the country, right? So you're getting up close to 1 million, and you were saying, Joe, the North Koreans are fighting with Russia. That's who's fighting with Russia, right? And they've found them. They've got a couple of captives. They know what's going on. At the end of the day, peace is the goal, right? I think Russia made a strategic mistake. I think they thought they could just go in there and take it, and they'd have it within a couple of days, and they didn't. And here we are 3 years later, and we're still going, right? Diplomacy of a level we've never seen before. A way out for Putin where he saves face, I think is going to be important. But here's another interesting thing that's starting to come out more and more. This whole minerals deal.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about the fact that there are actually no minerals or rare earth minerals under the earth in Ukraine. And it's all
there's a whole new category according to Trump, right, called raw earth, right?
yeah. There's this this guy who basically before the war would spend all his time in Russia doing deals and getting people to invest in Russia. He said, I was all about making money in that part of the world. I can assure you, if I could make money, I was going to find a way to make money. There was no money to be made on these minerals, so minerals and metals. So I thought that's an interesting piece. It's sort of in the background. You might. I've got a couple of pieces in the weekend reads coming up, but I think that's an interesting aspect to the conversation that's going on. But yeah, peace, man.
Yeah, could minerals be the new weapons of mass destruction that we never find, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. But if Trump signs a deal and there is none.
Well, we know if they sign a deal and there is none, then what you have is an uncomfortable situation, but at least you have peace. I think that's the real concern. And I know, like within Russia itself as well, the story within Russia is completely different from the story outside of it, right? I mean, we see a different perspective, and within Russia, they do believe that they were the ones that were wrong, that they're the ones that were that are the victims. That what is being said, right now by Trump is true. This is what they feel is true, and what they're talking about, and what they're saying about Zelensky, for instance. It's just direct from the Russian playbook. I mean, it's really exactly what Russia would want you to say if they had a hand up your ass and said, "Say these words," right? He would say those words.
Although Jeffrey Sachs, he's been saying those words in a different way. But basically saying, like the whole NATO, Ukraine becoming part of NATO, all of that sort of. He's been saying the same things for a long time, so I don't think it's just that, you know?
It's not that there weren't any missteps along the way. I mean, look, NATO played the game wrongly. This is definitely did something. They destabilized the situation. They made some moves, and we're paying some price. We're paying a price for it. But it gave them the excuse for it, right? So you kind of wind the clock back to go where and when the seeds were planted, right? So with Crimea, that was the first test. That was where Russia said, okay, let's see what happens, and then they saw what happened, and then everyone said, okay, everybody cool it. Let's be cool about this. And Russia was waiting for the opportunity. It's like it was always on the list. They always wanted to do it. Let's have a reason. NATO gave them the reason to do it, right? It's like the story right now about fentanyl and Canada and fentanyl and Mexico. Okay, so it's the political reason to do the thing that you wanted to do in the first place, right? Ukraine's always been on Russia's list. It's always been there. It's on Putin's list anyway, right? It's his desire to rebuild the Soviet Union. It's been there. It's a crown jewel for him. He wants that, the resources that go along with it, everything else that went along with it as well. So he was just looking for the excuse, and the excuse was given to them by NATO. So there's no getting away from the fact that NATO played it wrong. Politically, they did something that was wrong. And so, had they gone with neutral, you're neutral, and we're going to be completely we're going to try to maintain that, maybe bring in peacekeepers, whatever it was, to say that it's neutral from the start, that would have been fine. But as soon as the talks began to be about protecting ourselves, and therefore including Ukraine in NATO, then there was a problem, right? I mean, if the reasons for NATO expanding were to be the reason for an invasion, Poland should have gone down a long time ago, right?
But they're NATO.
Yeah, but Poland should have gone down because, well, it's an aggression. All the things that should be true about.
No, during that time, Russia was very weak. It was during Yeltsin's reign.
Yeah.
During that time, there's no chance. Even if they tried to, they couldn't. Yeltsin was a drunk. He couldn't even get his own brain together. So I think that logic doesn't swim with me.
No, I'm with you. Different time.
Different time, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're going to start your expansion, now's the time, right? Okay. So the collapse of democracy. So we've talked about it. 70% of the world's nations are no longer democratic, and that's significant. I can't remember where we used to be, but it kind of feels like the world sort of shifted 180 degrees, where the leader of the free world has now become the leader of the axis of evil. Although they're not participating as a leader, they're participating in an inferior role, which is bizarre. So obviously China's coming into the whole conversation. How do we prepare? Like, as far, and I'm not saying as nations, I'm saying as individuals, because people are really struggling with this. Have you guys got any thoughts, or if you want to talk about it from a nation perspective, or is it just a weird blip and we're just gotta?
I think technology will help. I mean, technology used in the correct way will help to keep people informed. And if you close down this particular platform, another one can pop up quite easily with today's technology getting very cheap. So that can help with proper usage. Leaders, I always believe that leaders always want to be the boss. They want to be the authoritarian if they can get away with it. It's only the system and the people that stops them from doing so. And even that, they can put up a veneer of democracy, and then they go ahead with doing what they really want underneath. So, of course, the institutions help in maintaining democracy, but the new kid on the block is probably technology. We have handphones and cameras everywhere that we can use. Most CCTV in the public is internet protocol, which can be hacked as well. Probably not so difficult to be hacked, and you can access a lot of images and so on, and expose a lot of wrongdoings. I think technology, as a technologist, maybe I'm biased. I feel that technologies we we are the nice, honest chaps that work hard and put our head down and not care about other things other than getting the technology working. And I think it's about time that the good ones, not the bad ones,
Yeah, exactly.
get to use it for the democratization of the people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because the use of technology is also a massive part of the problem, whether it's information communication, cyber warfare.
Yes.
I mean, I think we've been in war for
it can be
decades.
misused as well. It can be misused as well. For instance, if you think about it, most of the main data centers are owned by Americans, right? And owned by Amazon and just a few guys actually.
Yeah.
So really they can really have access to data if they want to. Okay. Of course there are rules and regulations, but if you own that place, you have a free hand to what you can do.
Yeah.
Right. So it can be misused as well. You can end up as a technology billionaire dictator. They can do that as well. But on the ground, because their business require consumer devices and cheap technology accessible to the masses, on the ground people can rise up using this very cheap consumer electronics. Yeah.
So, Michael, because one of the things that, a lot of people are talking about a lot of different types of technology as being a risk, but one of the things that's been discussed more is the cloud and basically data centers. It's the people who own the data centers who are actually the ones that are the greatest risk. And when you hear like the whole butterfly revolution and why Elon Musk's in the middle and Jeff Bezos and all of this, Peter Thiel and all those guys, right? And it all keeps coming back to the technocrats, and they're actually the ones who are driving this direction in the world. But when you look at technology, what scares you the most?
AI. Yep. AI scares me the most. AI is progressing so fast. It is now speaking with voice of emotions that is very hard to distinguish between what is real and what is not. Thankfully, the visuals they have not got there yet. They are very good, but you still can kind of know that this person, this is an avatar rather than a real person. They will never be able to close the gap 100%, but it will be close enough to fool many people and do many things. Yeah, and that is pretty scary. A lot of jobs will go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, people are already bamboozled by the information we have before AI. So, the impact of AI, like it's just that boggles me. And also the jobs, right? So I don't know if you saw, was it last week? China basically has moved, their entire government is now run by AI. It didn't talk about the impact on people or losing their jobs, but it was just like within a week, AI was just everywhere in the country. Did either of you see that?
Well, no.
Yeah,
I hadn't seen
that. I mean, to be fair, a lot of jobs will be created by AI too, but those people that are displaced are unable to do those jobs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Back to this thing about whether or not we get to a place where it's distinguishable, where we can see people. The thing about AI is it's already here. I'm really just gonna say that. I'm going to say that that line where we don't know has already been crossed, because all you need to be is as good as an awkward person, right? If you can do it, if you can be AI and you can be kind of awkward, you've crossed the line. You've just come across as awkward. And if it's only people who are perhaps a little bit looking out for the differences and all that are going to say, oh, this is not quite that, or whatever it is. I can tell you this, as somebody who's got a pretty keen eye for a lot of things, I've been caught by videos where I go like that, how did they do it? And then I go, oh yeah, of course, AI, right? Because it looked good enough, real enough, and it's like this is right? So I would say we're way past the point of saying that we can't do it. They can't do it. It is being done. As in, like, I have some tools that I've been playing around with as well, where I can appear to be somebody else because I'm driving the movements. I'm actually doing that, and there's some other things that can happen in almost real time. So it's about processing rather than it is about the technology, right? So as we increase processing power, and if I have it local and on my computer, I can do this to somebody else. But if I can try and figure out something else in terms of like something social, I can work on a way to engineer a moment. It's being done. I mean, you just look at the number of things people are getting away with right now. It has already crossed that line. So the skill that we need to build is actually this skill to not get taken by that, and to be actually not AI proof, but human proof. As in, like, how do I make it such that we are better at figuring out how to deal with people, whether they're fake or not? How do I get better at being an effective person versus a world that may not be completely benevolent, right? Whether they're AI or whether they're real.
But the fact
Maybe
that you
it's
almost got
too
caught out,
late,
but the fact that you almost got caught out, Joe, sort of surprises
Yeah.
me, right? If you get caught out, what's the hope? Like it goes back to the question I've been asking for a long time is, is it inevitable? And basically it's the complete and utter failure of our civilization. And is this all part of that? Just, we're just waiting. We don't know the date. So there's an article I shared. Did you have a chance to look at the Butterfly's Choice? Did you have a chance? You might not have. It was written by Michael Haupt, Haupt, South African guy, and he positions himself, I don't know him, on LinkedIn as "I disrupt sustainability and regeneration illusions." And I recommend the Butterfly's Choice. I put it in the weekend reads. But basically he's sort of talking about the history of human evolution and the stages that we go through. And he goes back, through, like, what was it, 6,000 years across 26 societies. And there's always a pattern. And basically, phase one, is mixture and stability, all the way through to phase 6, which is totalitarianism and decay, which he puts at 2009 to 2024. To phase 7, invasion and emergence, and that's 2025 to 2050. So based on what he's saying, we're in the invasion and emergence stage, and we're hearing about the invasions. Trump's going to take Greenland and Canada, Panama Canal, China's going to take Taiwan, and obviously Russia's going to do what it wants to do. But is that where we are? Is that just the pattern of human history, and we're just on the road to collapse? We just don't know the date yet.
Well, I think we're way past our use by date. I mean, in terms of where something is supposed to work, right? Something has a natural path. It's supposed to go there. The US has gone past that use by date. The human race has gone by our use by date as well, in terms of how we've developed ourselves. But we've risen above that, again, through ingenuity, right? So that's why we live longer. That's why democracy has lasted longer than it should have, because of the natural cycle of things. And now we have a chance to do something which is different. As in, like, if you look at the pattern of what's happened before, it doesn't mean it has to happen again, because you can change the steps in between, right? So like the path for disease and the human race and everything else, it's supposed to go a certain way. Something's going to happen, and then the rest, is likely to fall as well. Like, for instance, we're looking at the eventual destruction of civilization when the big asteroid hits, right? It's eventually supposed to happen because we are in space and they are heavenly bodies hurtling around, and we're going to hit one of these days. Of course, that if we don't change things, right? If we don't figure out how to deflect, how to sense them, how to look out in the skies and see them, how to whatever, we can do something about that. We can change the way the pattern usually plays out. So we have an opportunity right now, I think, for that to happen as well. So there's some things that are taking us deeper into this, which is really troublesome, as in the huge difference is we have the thoughts of each other to hear a lot easier now. So the speed of that is happening.
It's also a risk.
All these other, sorry?
It's also a risk.
Yeah, it's a huge risk. It's a huge risk, and it's a huge difference, right? So the big difference before is this lack of information. I don't know what you're doing. There's no way for me to know what you're doing. There is no there is no perfect knowledge and there's no ability for that to happen. So you can only figure out what happened once all the dust is settled. Right now, we are figuring things out along the way in real time. At the same time, there's also the heightened ability to create that misinformation at scale, right? There's also all these things that can happen. So uh, the pattern doesn't necessarily hold, although it does have the pressure is in that direction. And the thing is now is, I mean, we have an ability if the right people come together. So Michael, the answer to the question of what can we do, if enough of us are coming together to speak about these things, to have an opinion about these things, so that when we see something, we can maybe do something on our side and be supportive and have the right thing to say, the right kind of retort. Like, like what we did just now when we're talking about Russia being weak, for instance, right? That kind of pushback is what we need in everyday life. We talk about it and understand something about it and go and find out about it. Like for me, I'm going to go and do some more work on to look at the details of what you said, as well as I'm sure you'd want to do with mine as well. And I go, that's what we need to do more of, so that more of us can make a decision when the time is right that is going to be good for us, against maybe humanity's worst behavior, maybe against the environment, maybe against some heavenly body, and maybe against politicians. So that's the kind of thing that we need to be able to do, kind of at scale. I just went to the Singapore Discovery Center as part of my journey towards being a Singaporean. This is going to come as a surprise to many people that I'm not. And as part of the Singapore Discovery Center tour, they talked about the history of Singapore and where we were, the development and the different circumstances around it. And that made a difference to my perspective on things. As someone who has been, I think, immersed in society here and culture, it really opened my eyes to a certain perspective, right? And I think what's missing in a lot of the world is that the eyes being open to many perspectives, more perspectives than what they kind of arrive with. So yeah, we have to kind of work something out. We have to be better than we are right now. And someone has to take the lead. And it may not be leadership in the usual sense. We don't necessarily have to have that one person that takes the lead, because a movement can happen. I think the mathematics of it, I think you were saying a long time ago, Andrea, right? It just takes 3%. 3% of the group to sort of get an idea, and if you can figure out what it is, and it can begin the movement. And that is something that I think globally we need to do a lot more of. We're looking at it from a perspective that is completely outside of it. I mean, I was just listening to a discussion about how you can feel that you are worse off or not in a great situation because of just being compared to the wrong wrong measuring stick, right? I mean, we think about how people in the UK can feel that their life is okay, but it's not okay once you begin to figure out the life that you're comparing it against. Like, folks from the UK only begin to feel poor once they've been to the US, and it's like, that's a strange thing, right? Or you can feel like you can feel really proud about the medical system in the UK until you come to Singapore and you go like, well, a 2-year waiting list, and over here is 6 months. And then over here in Singapore, you can go, you can still feel upset about that as well. You have a system that is really just making you wait 6 months instead of 2 years, but it's making you pay, and so you're more upset, and you think like, oh, people in Denmark have it happier, right? So we've got to figure ourselves out as a human race, to try and figure out to do the work that we need to do on ourselves to come to our higher selves, that we can be better equipped, not to be manipulated, not to be as triggered. I mean, the one thing that I hoped, I thought about what we could do with, was actually just a whole lot less emotion. Right now, we've just so much burning up in emotional energy most of it has no there is no basis. I mean, there's not no basis for it. The basis for it is real, but the waste of it is that if we could somehow harness all of that emotional energy for something that was greater than just the emotion.
Yeah, I'm with you, Joe. Michael, do you want to say something?
Well, not really, no.
Okay. No, I'm 100% with Joe. So I've always been of the opinion we've just got to try. We've got to try, and we never stop. We never stop trying. We never give up. You know, David said, you know, if it is the butterfly's choice, then it doesn't matter. Oh, wait a minute. What did he say? If a system isn't chaotic, he meant, then it's chaotic. That doesn't mean choices don't matter. It means we can control the outcome. The difference is whether you live to be the better you, or you use the world to rationalize why you don't. And it's really easy to do that right now. And I'm like, I deal with the dark stories of our world every single day, but I remain a positive person that's trying to say, come on, guys. Yes, I know I'm telling you ugly, hard things, but we've got to come together and we've got to change it, right? So the article I was referring to before, he talks about human consciousness as the major sort of strength of human beings, right? So you were talking about consciousness. I thought that would be worth sort of pulling up from this article. And he said we've got to move to the mycelial consciousness, right? And obviously fungal networks is where that comes from. But basically it's about seeing systems collaborating across boundaries and regenerating rather than extracting. The question isn't whether this evolution happens. The question is whether you'll participate consciously, get dragged along unconsciously, or miss the bus entirely. And I thought that was a really kind of a good way of describing it, because that's where we are. But if everyone keeps pulling back, if everyone keeps drawing away, if everyone keeps saying, I just can't deal with this anymore and I've got to sit in fear, we've got to step into this time. And you don't have to do it on an international level. You don't have to do it on a national level. You do it locally within your own family, within your own community. You build strength there, because that's the first place you're going to, you know, I'm thinking of all of these people in Queensland and New South Wales who are going to wake up tomorrow after this typhoon comes through. And before it's even hit, massive trees have been ripped out of the ground. Electricity's down already. Phones are down already. You know, it's only a category 2, but man, you know, like, and it's the width of it across, you know, there's 20 million homes at risk. It's a big one for Australia, right? Who's going to come to their help? Their community, you know, and that's always your community. So focus on your community, whether it's, you know, looking at food security, community farms, you know, so David calls it social capital, right? So that's something we talk about a lot on Climate Courage. It's really coming together. Energy resources, protecting the elderly, taking care of people who are disabled, or taking care of people who are not flourishing because for whatever reason, rather than, you know, pushing them to the outside, pushing them into the streets, bring them into the community and help. You know, that's, I think, the biggest power that we've got right now. We've moved into our homes, into our screens, and we're not out there. We're not part of our societies anymore. And by being disenfranchised from each other, I think we do tend to live in more fear. So that's the place I think we've got to start if we want to deal with what's coming, you know, if we want to overcome.
But as what Joe says, many people are very emotional when it comes to discussing geopolitics, especially if you're in opposite poles. Say, suppose some is pro-Trump, anti-Trump, pro-US, anti-Russia, anti-China, blah, blah, blah. I think it's very laborious. I do have some conversations with such people, and it's just a little bit overly emotional and too much to take, I think.
Yeah, so to me, pro-Trump or against Trump, right? I personally find the man very, very distasteful. But the people who are supporting him, the 30%, the MAGA voters, I want to understand them and why they, what their problems are. I want to hear from them. I want I want to know. So anyone who thinks like that, I want to know why they think that's a solution, and that's what we don't do, because, I've talked to people, the families that just don't even talk to each other. And because they're both sides of it. To me, that's never the solution. It's not about who they vote for, who they admire. It's about what are the concerns that they have that drive them in that direction in the first place. Because that's to me where the problem lies. We're not hearing each other's concerns. We're not hearing each other's problems. That's what we've got to get better at.
One factor is that a lot of Americans are not very well informed and able to reason things out. For example, the tariffs. Trump said that he's going to punish China, and the American folks, on the ordinary folks, they think that China is paying for the tariffs.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? If you have a visible population, I don't know what proportion, a visible population like this that cannot count, cannot logic things out, then it's easy to sway them. Whoever, doesn't have to be Trump, can be somebody else.
Exactly.
Easy to sway them because you just say things that appear to be sweet, but they don't know the after effects. They are the one paying for the tariffs, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at what's happening in the US market, the economic sort of, I'm sure Joe's been looking at the stock market and everything that's been going on. And then these Reagan videos being resurfaced. I saw it on LinkedIn, talking about tariffs and the long-term implications of tariffs. And you've got the short-term impact, a medium impact, and then the long-term. And he's talking about it, it suppresses innovation and creativity and entrepreneurialism, and it destroys industries and it destroys the country. That's the long-term impact. And and you're right, but that's an information problem, right? But it's also a structural problem. Like, how do we get to the point where we've got people in power who got into power saying these sorts of things that are ultimately going to be so bad for the people who have voted for them? How do we fix that problem? That's, to me, is the bigger question. Do you know what I mean?
They say that if good people don't go into politics, bad people will. So maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, I know, but they don't think they're bad people, right? So thanks for joining us, David. We can choose to not to allow him to change what we do. So, yeah, I mean, I just keep going back to the Trump's the symptom of a problem, right? He's the outcome of a problem. And we can spend all of our energy focused on him, or we can spend our time looking at the problem and how it happened in the first place. And social media is part of the problem. Misinformation, disinformation. How the hell are we even here? Why is it okay? So Wales is just basically recently making it, if a politician intentionally lies or shares mis or disinformation, there's penalties and potentially they'll be kicked out. Why is it, why do we even have this disinformation reality? Because it's creating a massive problem, right? So, those sort of problems, these are big problems that we need to solve, but I think we keep focusing on the outcome of the problems versus discussing the problems. Joe, you're nodding. Help me out.
Well, there's a thing that always bugs me about how some of this might be right. This might be the good thing that is actually happening for us, right? And I had this thought the other evening about how we got out of the Great Depression, right? Because the world was in a Great Depression, and we got out of it essentially by telling a big lie, right? It was a big lie until it wasn't. There was collusion by everyone to misinform first America and then the rest of the world, right? It cascaded all over the place. But basically, to tell America life is good, life is okay, here's the good news, everything is fine, we're moving forward, everything is good. And we got there. And I looked at it and I thought, okay, sometimes it's because there is there's a version of life as we know it, and we go like, that is absolutely what we need to do. And I thought, is it possible that where we're going to head, or where we head, is a new place, a new reset, where things are actually going to be okay, and that we're going through this terrible birthing process right now, and that if we spend less time resisting and saying, okay, let's see where this party's going, it might work out, right? Of course, you have to put a lot of things on hold. You have to think, okay, I'm gonna put that aside, put all of it aside, and go like, okay, what's a brand new story? And it's very hard to do that. You can't stop your mind from thinking, I need to worry about all these different things, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, if you have this big calamitous thing that happens to us all, and if we think about this current moment as the same thing, are we facing something similar to an ice age? Are we entering an ice age of politics? Where we've had this sudden change and everything is now new, and then you think about what is going to be on the other side of this. How do we get to the other side of this? Are we working too hard to say we want it the way it was before the ice age, or are we going, all right, let's try and figure out new ways to deal with this. Let's live better so that we're protected from this or that or whatever it is. And the irony of it all is part of the answer is what is what the tech bros seem to be pushing towards, right? It's like they're trying to get us to the other side of this, which is the network cities, the network town, the network countries, right? It's a utopian idea, and it is such a crazy idea. If you think about it, let's think about the idea of democracy as it was created, right? The idea of democracy, as the Greeks, some great thinkers began to think about how this whole thing is going to work, versus the kind of world it was at that time. When you go like, of course you're going to settle this with an army. I'm going to get my army. It's going to crush your army. I'm going to take your lands, and I want what you have, so I can overpower you. You become mine. That's the way it was. And then you have these people who say, come, let's try and do this thing this different way, and let's try and figure this other stuff out. It's mad. You think about the United Nations, and you think about the idea that we are never going to go back to war again. Why did that happen? It was this terrific pain that happened. The Second World War was the ice age that happened to us, and civilization as we knew it after then was the result of that. Maybe we're there right now as well. Now, again, I don't think we'll look upon this in a favorable way. We won't think, oh, what a great day that was when Trump happened. But I think much the same way we have the civilization that we have currently, that we're so involved in defending right now, we have Hitler to thank. It was so bad, this had to happen. We had Japan in the way it was going in the Second World War. We have them to thank. So that's kind of the thing that sits on. I mean, for me, it's about how we get over it. It's about human ingenuity in the end. What do we do when something happens? And as you know, in the midst of all this, if all the agencies get defunded and we miss the asteroid that gets us all, I mean, that would be that to me, as somebody who's a great fan of comedy, I would think that would be the ultimate banana peel, right? But then on the other side of that, what happens? They will be the rest of the story. It's unfortunately for me, it is interesting, and we are actually just caught in this world of egos where we go like, well, no, I'm right about this. No, we're right about this. Everybody's right about it, and it's almost like we can't let somebody else be right about it. I want to just go back to the idea of emotions as well. Before that, I am not saying that it is a waste to have emotions, because I think emotions drive action. I just think we need to do something about directing it. We shouldn't just have it consume us. We should it should go to action. It should create the next thing. It should create energy for action.
Yeah, I always say take the emotions out of it. So when I was in the army, my last 6 months, I worked for Defence Public Relations, and I worked with this guy who used to advise the Australian government, and he was in the defence space, right? And he made a comment, and it's never left me. He goes, every recession, in every recession the world has ever been in and will ever go in, war follows, because war gets countries out of recession, right? So that's also always something. So the fact that the wars that are going on in the world, yeah, economically we're pretty screwed, but at the same time we've never had the environmental, the poly crisis, like the biodiversity, all that stuff around at the same time, right? And it's never been global, the risk. But I saw this quote on Twitter yesterday, and I need to find out who said it. The old world is dying, the new world struggles to be born, now is the time of monsters. And I thought that really spoke to me about this time. You know, we're seeing some really crazy stuff coming to the surface, and it's like, well, what's going on here? But Michael, I wanted to, just before we go into the next piece, anything that you wanted to add? I've just got one more thing quickly that I wanted to add about what we need to do. But what are you thinking here when you're listening to this?
It's a bit too big for me. I'm just a simple man. Yeah. The scary part is that usually end of recession, there's a war, and then you rebuild. I don't want to go through that.
Yeah.
That's usually quite true. Yeah, it's quite true.
But the Earth can't cope with war. Like we're on the cusp of, so many like massive.
We're almost there now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, or potentially already crossed. I'm going to reference some just before we finish. But the article I referenced earlier, said that conscious evolution is what we really need to do now. And I think if I wanted to share with everyone what we need to do and what you can do and what you have control over, is go on this conscious evolution yourself. And as you go on the journey, take your friends and family with you. And he finishes with redesign for regeneration instead of extraction. Distribute intelligence instead of centralizing control. Build reciprocal relationships instead of exploitative ones. Contribute to regional resilience instead of global fragility. I thought that was I'll share the article. I thought it was really well written. There's a lot more to it. I'm going to go and check him out more. He's just popped up. But crypto's obviously been in the news long before Trump was elected, and I think the crypto crowd and the tech bros were a big part of the reason that Trump was elected. But we've seen some pretty interesting news coming out on crypto and corruption in the last couple of weeks. Joe, you've been keeping an eye on that.
Well, I've been hearing the discussions around it, and a lot of the idea is, well, crypto is just going to enable all kinds of corruption to happen. But here's the news: we've had corruption before crypto. It's it's just a different tool. People have found a different way to do this and influence the way things work. But here's the reason why it is so significant. The idea is you can use what looks like a free market situation, and the challenging part about this is that it's outside of the SEC for Americans, right? So it's outside of it's not a regulated entity. So crypto can exist outside of the SEC, so it isn't subject to the same sort of rules that the rest of business is subject to, and so it allows for things like it allows for bribes to be given in a different sense, in the sense that you can launch something brand new and you can support the currency or the new crypto that I'm creating, and therefore you can pump that particular asset, and I can make money from it, and it can be this thing that happens from it is in a sense a kind of transfer of the wealth, and it's done digitally, and it's done in a sort of like behind the scenes sort of way, right? The thing about this is that if only they were trying to hide it, that it seems like it's no longer a case of them trying to hide that this is what is actually happening. It is actually just doing it at speed. right? It's saying like, okay, here's a way you can give me money. Here's my Venmo number, and you say to everybody, "This is my Venmo number," right? So it's actually not as surprising to me. It's just a new pathway. It is just basically a new way of saying I'm accepting your money, and you can give it to me this way. Now the real the danger, I guess, is the way now we're getting into a point where they're trying to move it into the next phase, which is the idea of a digital crypto reserve for the United States, right? Now, it seems like it might be a good idea that you want to have currencies that are based on what the world might be using down the road. And I go like, okay, there's something in there. But even the people in the crypto space are upset about what, or not upset. They have different views about what is going to develop now, what it seems to be in development, right? And the idea is America's Federal Reserve will include cryptocurrencies and not just the one currency. There are a lot of people who are quite okay, even the crypto space, who said they're quite okay if they just use Bitcoin as a reserve for crypto, as a kind of a replacement for gold, as a kind of reserve currency. But the fact that they've gone on to include things like, I think, Solana, RXP, I can't remember. I can't remember the list of it, but it was a whole bunch of other, lot less stable.
5 of them, right?
Something like, I can't remember the complete list. And that is actually exposing, I think, the US to a huge risk, because if you talk about crypto, you can try and have cold wallets and all the different kind of stuff, but if you have something which is data and it's hackable, at some point it's a question of how do we hack, right? So I'm sure this is an area that's much in Michael's field as well, right? The idea that it's all unhackable for now, because we haven't unleashed. We just started talking about quantum technology, quantum computing on the last show. There's a lot of stuff that's being just taken on board and going, okay, let's gather this data, let's hang on to it right now, and we can decrypt it when we have the technology that's going to make it viable or feasible to do so. But yeah, it's both a great idea and a terrible idea, right? Even for the people who know the business, for instance, like I said, they much rather they used a standard that is designed to be inflexible, so that it behaves like gold in terms of its supply, so Bitcoin, rather than something that is super flexible like all the other platforms that have been put up as well.
Michael, have you got any thoughts? Because the thing for me, like, at least they're being transparent in their corruption, right? So the guy,
well,
everyone wants more transparency. But the five coins, I can't remember what they are called either, because I'm not a crypto person. The guy that's in charge of one of the I can't remember what his title is. He has all 5 or something like that, right? But regardless, if it goes down and it's tied to the Federal Reserve, to me, the implications of that are just absolutely enormous. So that was more where I was sort of sitting. But Michael, what are your thoughts?
About hackability? Everything is hackable because everything has the weakest link. So basically, you hack the weakest link, and usually it is on the laptops of somebody who owns the cryptocurrencies. So and likewise, in the Federal Reserve or whichever central bank, it's just a slightly more secure system, but there'll still be weakest link to hack. And I think this is something not needed. I think we all take risks in life, right? But we also don't take certain risks that is not needed.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
The greatest risk that if I could just talk about this risk, right? The greatest risk really is actually one of the features of gold, right? If you think about why gold inherently is quite a useful way to use as a reserve, is actually one of the reasons why people talk about crypto being the great thing it is. It's really hard to move gold, and that's something that if you convert a lot of wealth into crypto, and this is as a reserve, as a country, you can technically heist a country's wealth on a thumb drive.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Joe. Just because I'm still, Joe. You know that I spend a lot of time trying to understand complicated stuff. To this day, I can't get my head around crypto. I just can't. And people have tried to, I don't know, maybe I need to go and do a course in it or something, but it just doesn't make any sense in my head, right? It's data. Gold is a physical thing that you dig out of the ground, and it is a limit. I mean, I know the data, the coins are so-called limited, right? When you look at environmental risk, right? So when you look at heat extremes, they're talking about basically the entire, from the equator up north and south of it, it's going to become unlivable because it's going to become so hot. So there's plenty of data centers in this part of the world. When it becomes too hot or the water runs out, they're going to be gone. Severe weather events, nuclear war obviously is in the mix. Crypto relies on technology working, and technology works if the environment that the technology exists in is relatively stable. We're moving into a period of instability, and a country is talking about putting some of their federal reserve into crypto. But there's more risk to crypto now than there's ever been from an environmental perspective. So that's one of the things that I don't understand about it. You guys might be sitting there going, she's nuts, but like literally there is, when I did my wet bulb temperature research, and generators start failing at 40 degrees Celsius, electricity grids start failing at 50 degrees Celsius, solar panels start failing at 6 degrees Celsius. Water, there's 7% more water for every degree of temperature rise. Where water falls is no longer predictable. You need energy and water for a data center. So we're we're moving into a future where all of these things aren't predictable, but then we're sort of anchoring our future on technology that relies on those things. It's the same with our food systems as well, right? Where it's unpredictable, so food security is a big issue. But I mean, does that make sense to you guys?
Well,
have you thought about it?
Blockchain inherently supposed to be more stable because it's an open ledger. So hopefully these servers are sitting in various parts of the world, which means that it's spread out, right? So as a ledger, it is relatively stable.
Right.
And
the other ones?
As for the heat of servers, they are already experimenting with, I think Google did that. They put their servers in underwater, in the sea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the error rates are not that much lower. So it was more. So there are certain things that we can do to make technology more stable if the environment gets unfavorable to do so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
but I agree with you. It's still crazy. It's still crazy. Actually, as a technologist, right? As a security person, when I go to buy a drink, I use cash.
Yeah.
Then this young chap next to me, you use cash? I say, yeah, I use cash. Why do you use cash? I say, I kind of subconsciously don't trust the electronics and all that. So I use cash, physical cash. Yeah.
Yeah. And everyone should be really driving back for cash, right? It's when
it's not happening. I think young people, they're all tapping away.
I know. But the idea, every time you use a card, you're losing money. When you exchange cash, you don't. But one of the first things you should put in your emergency bag. So the Dutch government have just put out this get your 3-day emergency bag, and one of them is cash. When the people are suffering from the hurricanes in Carolina, they didn't have any cash, and the ATMs were down. They couldn't buy anything. The cards didn't work, the phones didn't work. So really going back to some basics I think is a good thing. I don't know if you want to talk about this, Michael, but I wanted to ask you. So the Hegseth, the defense minister in the US, which the former Fox guy, has ordered Cyber Command to stand down on Russia planning, and this was a cybersecurity call. Did you have a chance to have a look at that piece? Because
yes, I read that article. the defense of the United States infrastructure, government infrastructure, will continue. It's not going to stop just because this command center is stood down for Russia.
Okay.
That means they're not going to do preemptive strikes or whatever snoopy work that they're going to do on Russia. But I believe these 2,000 or 3,000 personnel will not be out of work, because there's a lot of work to do in other countries. For instance, to keep tabs on Mexican drug lords and so on. So there's a lot of work to do. By the way, technology is not all button press and plug and play. There's a lot of laborious stuff as well, especially if you go into digital forensics, because the number of devices and signals that we send out, the footprints are just increasing exponentially. So this is one area that, despite AI trying to help by reducing your search space, recognizing patterns and all that, it's still a long way to go before AI will help you very productively. At the moment, they're just helping. So then you need to have human labor. And my students were complaining about their recent assignments. They say, "Sir, your assignment is very laborious. I need so much patience and time." I said, "Well, that's how it is. What do you expect?" They want things easy because it's an IT degree, it's a cybersecurity degree. No, it's not going to happen. Not yet, anyway. I think there's one rare area that AI has not caught up yet in a big way.
Yeah, interesting.
I think the big concern I have about that particular development really is it's the changing of the status of Russia.
Yes.
In terms of what you look at it, right? How you look upon them as they're supposed to be, instead of the adversary, instead of the person you want to keep your eye on, you're literally saying, no, we're not going to spend our time on them. When arguably they're the people you need to spend your time on.
They are now considered trusted partner. If you're not snooping on them, they are a trusted partner.
Did you see there was this piece of code that got out this week, and it was because one of the troll farms hadn't paid their bill or something like that, and this piece of code came out, and basically it says write this in English, and then if someone writes this, you respond with this in English, right? And so then they did that, and then someone messed with the code and gave them another response about it was something about American presidents playing on the beach, and it was this real life sort of example where, first of all, the person responded with the first request, and then the next one responded with this sort of lyrical poem about presidents on the beach. And it was really interesting. They obviously, that account got kicked off of Twitter, but it was a really interesting little sort of capture of what's really going on, but also a message, when the trolls and the bots are coming after you, just ignore them, right? Because especially if you've been doing it long enough, like I have, and you just see the regularity in the comments and the themes, and they're all saying the same things. They might say them in slightly different ways, but it's really the same. If you're a female, there's really similar sort of commentary. If you are talking positively with somebody, supporting someone, they're often very childish with, "Ooh, look at you two, you're lovers," that sort of stuff. And we've actually had comments like it on the show. Between you and Tim, do you remember that, Joe? Some troll was going, "Ooh, you two are boyfriends, kiss, kiss." It was weird.
Well, the great thing about having the kind of eyesight that I have and the way I use the stuff here, I really can't read the comments. So I just know approximately what they're saying, but I don't know what they're doing actually.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it brings up the ratings. I don't know.
Oh no! Well, you just can't talk to them.
The big thing that I took a step back and sort of realized, what's going on with Trump is that fundamentally we don't realize that he is a TV producer. In his mind, he's a TV producer, and he's creating a TV show, and it's about the ratings. And the only way that all of this makes sense, if you just said, "Oh, it's all a TV show," suddenly it all makes sense. You go, "Oh, okay, that explains why all this is supposed to happen," right? And the scary part about it is, I was I was listening to this analysis, which was saying that, a lot of this stuff would usually be brinksmanship. It usually is about saying that I'm going to do this, I threaten this, and this is the thing that I think might happen if you don't do this, right? And the wild card that is Trump is the fact that he doesn't realize that, this might be a bad idea. We shouldn't do it. This is not a good step. This is not a good idea. So the challenge now is that you have a situation where the unthinkable is now just what's being done. It's not just that you can't imagine that that's going to happen. It now is just being done because it's the interesting thing to do. And the analogy, I think the parallel or the idea that we're looking at Nero, that there is a little bit of that. I mean, he's just entertained by the whole thing, right? It's just, let's see what happens. This is crazy. This is and the thing is, coming from a place of abundance, he does not care about what actually happens on the ground. He wants the scores to be good. He wants the applause to be good. He doesn't care about the actual pain that it's going to cause as it happens. And that's
he said it's good TV, right? He mentioned it was, this is good TV. He did say that.
But I know a lot of people can't conceive of that as an idea. So, when in my career, I've worked in technology PR and have been in the room with the biggest technology billionaires in the world, right? And I've been in smaller meetings with the work I've been doing, and I can feel the disassociation from reality because they're so far removed from reality in the work that they're doing. And I shared a quote the other day. Did you? I don't know if you saw it. Let me. It's going to be on my phone somewhere, but it just completely spoke to me. Here it is. Sorry. Give me a sec. These are people who are used to talking in rooms where no one challenges them. Your stupidity gets accepted and you get more confident in it. And when I saw this, I heard it. That's why I had to grab it. This is Gil Duran. He's the guy that talks about the butterfly revolution, and Curtis Yarvin and Peter Thiel and all those sort of guys, right? So to me, that makes a lot of sense. But on the Trump side, we've got a couple more pieces. The drug use in the family is well known. Don Jr., there's some video of him sniffing and doing his gums and stuff, which is a sign of cocaine use. But Elon Musk is known to be a user of ketamine and has admitted it publicly. And it's one of these questions I've asked, with Joe and I've talked about before. And in The Atlantic, they published this article, what ketamine does to the human brain. And basically, it's a pretty interesting thing. So one study, even with infrequent users, so that's like three times a month, scored higher on delusional thought scale than ex-ketamine users. If you use it sort of on average 20 times a month, they scored even higher. People believed that they were the sole recipients of secret messages, or that society and people around them were especially attuned to them. And so drug use in our world, whether it's from opioids or to ketamine to marijuana to all forms, so legal and illegal, pharmaceutical, and the ones that what I mean, opioids, not
recreational,
opioids, yeah. Mm-hmm. It is everywhere now, more than it used to be. Like drug use, like if you looked at graphs, right? And then you've got the COVID impacts of the brain, and there's a lot more studies coming around. We've just had 5-year anniversary of the COVID pandemic, right? And I actually think we're in a really interesting time from how our brains operate. But when we've got people in powerful positions who have delusions of grandeur, then and they're known to be using drugs that cause these problems, and I think that's a bit of a part of the problem too. I mean, have you guys been looking at any of that or thinking about it?
Well, I can't say I've been experimenting myself, but I've been exploring the idea quite a bit. I mean, in terms of like the altered states that we talk about. I mean, people are in different altered states. I think in another article it talks about, for instance, Elon Musk's the amount of sleep he gets, right? I relate as someone who doesn't get much sleep myself, and I realize that at different times of the day I have an altered state. I think a bit differently. I am inclined to do different things. I do riskier things at certain times of the day. And the great big drug factory is actually in here in all our heads. We actually have the ability to create all kinds of drugs, and it all comes from the thinking, right? All the thoughts. So there's these ideas of megalomania, the dreams of the illusions of grandeur, and all that. You don't need a drug to do that. You can get yourself there with the right circumstances. And I always think about how people in power are usually playing out something that we're inherently. I think we're inherent. It's inherent to the way we are, as in like there's some kind of revenge story that's happening, right? This is the comeuppance. It's the something that happened to you when you were young, and this is going to sound all airy fairy, but I think that people in power who rise to power usually are they're trying to balance something else that happened in their life, and this is the way ultimately that they get their revenge on the bullies, or they get the status in society. Like they show someone up. Some of them may well be just trying to prove themselves, to their father. They may it may be as much as it may be as simple as the pattern of behavior of a son that has been looked down upon by his father as a ne'er do well, in terms of failure after failure after failure, and then he rises up and says, "Oh yeah, I'll show you what I can do." Right? I mean, if you think about Trump's rise, many people do put it down to Barack Obama egging him on until he said, "Yeah, you know what? I'll do it." Right? And that's the kind of thing that happens, I think, with a lot of leadership. It's not always a bad thing. I think you need people who want to prove something to do things, but you just got to be. Sometimes you got to be careful about the upbringing of the person, right? What are the fundamental values at the base of it? So Michael was talking about, for instance, how leaders want to do what they want to do, and I think that is fundamentally in the job description. A leader must want to do what they want to do, but what they decide, how they make that decision is something that they'll figure out, right? So you can figure out, you can learn to make a decision that is sustainable, and sustainable, it can take its many forms. It can be about the environment, literally, or it can be about the political environment. It could be all those things, right? So I think one of the thoughts that I've talked about over the years is about dynasty thinking, right? If you think about dynasty thinking, is how do I keep this going for a long time? And so if you look at what China has done and think about it in terms of dynasty, the Chinese dynasty is still continuing. The names have changed, but China's influence, it's not that they went away. They just had less influence for a while, and the winds have changed. So it's a complicated sort of thing, but everybody's playing out something that is about what they couldn't have before, or didn't have, or were put aside for before. I've always talked about how China's been trying to belong in the world, but it's like a like the if I can take a moment to step into a kind of parallel universe thing, right? If you look at that Zelensky meeting with Trump, I kind of see that whole thing being the Western powers and China, where China's Zelensky. There's something in there. It's a room of bullies who say this is the right thing to do. Why don't you do this? Why aren't you wearing a suit like the rest of us? It's one of those things. So it a lot of the big things that happen in the world can be reduced almost to a playground. It's almost,
man, I'd
like
love to
you can
see
put
them.
all these.
I'd love to see them try and do that with presidency. Oh, that would be amazing. Like he would be just, yeah, nah. he wouldn't take anything.
Well, if you think about what's been done, though, that's kind of what actually has been done in terms of politics, right?
Yeah.
In terms of saying who is right, who's wrong, who's respectable. That's the kind of thing that's
I
happened
think
in the
I
world.
think
So
that's the Western.
it's a digression. Yeah.
No, I think it's a Western perspective. But I have to pull you up on the drugs thing. Okay, Joe.
Oh yeah.
I know that you're Malaysian-born, Australian-raised, Singapore for what, 30 years? Yeah.
Long time now. I can't remember.
Yeah, yeah. I see you as pretty much aligned with most Singaporeans. So when I first came here, Singaporeans have got such a very clear idea that drugs are bad, right? And it's, I know that there are drugs here and there's people in prison for stuff, but as a society, it's pretty. The message went through from the government and it was heard, and most of the young people are pretty like, you don't do drugs, right? When I was in Australia, hanging out with my mates, and every possible drug, including ketamine under the sun, people are doing it, right? I've had friends go into, do get overdoses and be rushed to hospital. I've had I had a really funny conversation with a really great friend of mine who decided she wanted to have a period on crack, and she's the most amazing person you could ever imagine. But she just decided. And when I was last in Sydney, she told me the story, right? And I was just standing there, just listening with a big smile on my face, because it was a horrific story, but it was a fascinating story, and it was her story, right? And it's who she is, and I just wanted to hear it. Now she's clean, and that's it. She's done, right? So when I ask people, like, why do you think this? People in Australia, people will just go, drugs. I'm like, but why? How can you justify that sort of behavior? Drugs, So I don't think you can underestimate the fact that, like, when you have your mind-bending times of the day, you're not the most powerful man in the world with the power to do anything. So if you think of someone with the mind, their mind is bent most of the time. And, there's an article in Futurism that talks about how little sleep he actually gets and the decisions he's making. That's a risk to humanity. So, and I think I think drugs are not a good thing at that level of society. If you're going to run countries, if you're going to make decisions on war and nuclear weapons, then the ketamine story is obviously about Musk, but there's rumors that the rest of them are taking all sorts of stuff, right? We know Kennedy was on all sorts of painkillers for his back and all that sort of stuff. I think, we've never really addressed that, and we probably should. Yeah.
Look, I mean, we talk about everyone being sick or having a bit of a problem. I mean, look, I'm sorry, I said a bit of a problem. I said people can have really big problems, right? I mean, we've all been there when we've had a headache that can change our life, and we're going like, I'm not the guy at this point who can make a good decision because I got this terrible headache, right? And we still go ahead and we do it. We do what we have to do. So there's a lot to be said about not just drugs, but just mental health in general, right? It's like you were not going to say, "I'm not having a good day. I need to take a mental health day." I mean, that's just not going to happen in certain roles. But arguably, it would be necessary to do so. Will we ever get to a point where we're cool enough for that? I don't know. Maybe the nature of the beast is you can't do that. You can't be weak to be in that particular role, for instance, right? We're all playing a certain kind of role. So, I mean, Michael, you're familiar with this, right? If you've been cast in the role of this, then there's certain things you don't do, right? That's for the rest of the story to continue, because we're all living in a story. We all have to have something that we can refer to and go like, okay, this is still true. Because the moment something breaks, that illusion breaks, then the rest of the stuff that relies on that illusion kind of falls apart as well. You could have a very skillful, and this is where I think Trump succeeds because not enough people are doing it well. You can have a craft, you can have a storyteller craft something that is believable. Well, it's a creation of a world where people can believe what's going on, and they can therefore enter that world. That's the kind of situation that I think is currently in the U.S. The combination of power and a story and credibility, and enough disenfranchisement. Is that the word for it? From all that time, it just sets the stage for this new thing to become a truth, right? You can believe that this thing can be done. I mean, the U.S. I think why it could happen in the U.S. is because they are the land of trying out new stuff. I mean, if any product is going to succeed, if you're going to launch a new product, the U.S. is the place to do it. It's because fundamentally the U.S. Has a sense of possibility. It wants to try out stuff. It will do new things, and when things don't work, they're looking for a new solution. So right now, it looks like a good idea.
Although if you're launching cute fluffy stuff, it seems that Korea, Japan, and China like that stuff.
Yeah.
Which is kind of an interesting sort of commentary on society. All right, Michael. So we always wrap up with the final question, and we all sort of share what's keeping us distracted. So it could be anything you're watching, a movie, a podcast series, or reading, doing. We've had all sorts. I think Jess last time was talking about her musical passion. So when you're not doing all of the different things that you do, what do you do to turn your brain off? What's your distraction at the moment?
Well, I meditate several times a day. So
oh wow,
so that's to keep my sanity.
Yeah,
it varies. Each time maybe 40 minutes.
Wow. Several times a day.
So
That's
do
commitment.
I do that strictly every day. And on weekends, I join groups where we have group meditation, where then we absorb the energy of that calmness.
Yeah.
So that's what I do to keep my sanity. But otherwise, I don't have much time. I'm rushing from one thing to another.
Yeah, which makes it like knowing that you're doing basically 3 different jobs, knowing that you dedicate that much time to meditation. That's amazing. Have you ever tried it, Joe? Meditation?
Well, I was going to say I'm on the opposite side of that. My brain never turns off, and sadly, even when I go into a state of unconsciousness, I tend to have some kind of stimulus sort of still going. As in, I will put on a podcast on an earpod, lie on my side, and drift off to sleep. And I'm sort of like tracking the sounds of that, and sometimes it plays on, and I know it has some influence on the kind of thoughts that I have while I sleep. So yeah, no, I'm on the other side of things. I am more and more convinced that I am undiagnosed ADHD, just because of the symptoms are all there, right? I don't sleep that much. Time gets away from me. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't done.
No brains ever switch off, by the way, unless you're dead.
And then we don't know.
It's normal. It's a question of keeping it within bounds and slowly managing it. Be gentle with yourself in managing it. It will happen.
Yeah, I was introduced to guided meditation, and that's the only form, because I'm the same. I got a monkey mind, right? So that's the only form that ever worked for me. And then after I heard a couple of variations of guided meditation, you go into the crystal cave and you do all this sort of stuff. I then started coming up with my own guided meditations. So I go on these amazing journeys. I fly with dragons. I do all sorts of things. So that's my meditation. I don't do it enough. I don't dedicate as much time to it, and I should, because I feel great coming out of it, and I have a lot of epiphanies while I'm in it. But it is a massive contributor to peace of mind and contentment. It really is.
I think everybody should meditate regularly.
Yeah.
So that it would keep the naughty stuff down, and our peaceful nature up. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think spending time with people who are not as fortunate as you, I think, is another good way to get balance and perspective on life. That's something I've always made sure my kids have been exposed to, because they're privileged. So they need to know it, and I think it also gives them more compassion and empathy. So that's been important to me. All right, Joe, what are you distracted by? And I haven't had a chance to watch your shows that you recommended last week.
Well, I'm just going to keep on doubling down on that one. You might as well, get into it while it's still being unveiled. I'm referring, of course, to Paradise, which is a great, really just every new layer, every time it's going on, it's so good. But I've been noticing that I've been doing something a bit more this last couple of weeks, which is attending speaking events, as in events where the only thing that's supposed to happen is speaking. As opposed to events where there happens to be a speaker. And it's been interesting because I've been involved in one of those. I was there as a judge to give feedback and to help people with their journey as to being a speaker. And in another, I was just watching, well, I was actually just invited, and I was there to support somebody. And I was affected by something that was said on stage, and it's the thing that I think answers the question to Michael about what we can do, right? Sometimes it's on stage, sometimes it's in person, sometimes it's in the meal. I think what we say intentionally, what we do, that's the kind of thing that can make a bit of a difference. I am looking forward to having dinner tonight, where I'm going to have a meal with an Israeli couple, right? And we already know that we're going to be talking about what's happening in Palestine. And they know I have some views that are going to be different from what they have. They have their perspectives that they were saying they want to talk about and share about as well. But yeah, I think it's gonna, both of us are gonna to walk away either with a deeper understanding, of each other and a friendship, or we might just walk away.
No, you won't do that. You got the sensitivity. I mean, you should be able to talk to somebody from.
No, I'm just being facetious. I really believe where we are going to land in the world, where we ultimately need to get to, is a place where we really understand each other. I mean, the if I can just get on the soapbox one more time, right? I really detest the phrase "let's agree to disagree," right?
Yeah.
Only because it's usually used wrongly. What it usually is used for is to say, let's stop talking about this, right?
Yeah.
Let's not try to understand each other.
Shut up.
Yeah, let's shut up. Let's stop this, right? So I detest it being used in that way. When I hear someone using it to say, look, let's just shut up. I really, really do think that is where we have to be. We have to agree to disagree. And the only way we can do that is to understand what we disagree about. If what we try to do is to shut off and not learn what it is that we disagree with, then we can't disagree. We can just say, I believe what I believe. I don't know what you believe.
Yeah, and I don't want to listen to it. Yeah, Clinton's saying 0 Day on Netflix, and it's one that's popped up. But Steve's been away for a couple of weeks, so he's back in about 2 hours. He should be landing, so I'm looking forward to having him home. But of course, when he's away, I'm taking the opportunity to watch chick flicks, chick shows, everything that I know that he won't want to watch. I finished Sweet Magnolias, which is the corniest TV show on television, but I don't care. It makes me smile because I'm looking for distractions. But I started watching 2073, and that's that was released towards the end of last year, and it's a science fiction docudrama. And I didn't finish it. I haven't finished it. I will go back and try and finish it, but it's so bloody dark. And the year 2073 is where we're going to end up if we keep going the way we're going. And it doesn't look very nice. But I also did watch A Complete Unknown by the Bob Dylan movie.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
Now, look, I know everyone loves Timothy Chalamet because he's a pretty little boy. He's too pretty for me, but he sings every song. It's phenomenal. But yeah, I mean, Bob Dylan as a character. I saw a documentary on, one of those group gatherings where they all sang together, Live Aid, I think.
Yeah.
He's a very insecure kind of. He doesn't like being around people, right? And I thought, yeah, it's a pretty phenomenal movie. Have you guys seen it?
No, looking forward to it. It's on the list of many shows to catch, and I've been reviewing that list of mine as well. There's still a bunch of shows that I haven't caught up with, movies that have won awards, and I got to get around to it.
Have you seen it, Michael?
No, I haven't. I don't have much time to watch movies at the moment.
Yeah. Well, my
it's
sons
ironical, right? Yeah.
my sons are both into music, guitar, metal, and rock guitar. So I like watching music movies, especially with my older one, Lex. He's doing national service at the moment. So on the weekends, we just get a little bit of time with him, and I like watching. I encourage him to watch the performances of all different types and genres of music, rather than being closed-minded about only what the music that they love, because I think that there's something to learn from everyone, whether it's Beethoven or Mozart or Ozzy Osbourne. It doesn't matter. So and he's really embraced that, and that's in the last few years he's really embraced it. So it's a real joy to watch those sort of things, because he started out in folk music, right, which is very different to what my boys are paying attention to. So I enjoyed that. So
since you mentioned biopics like that, right? I think you may want to check out Maestro. I think Maestro might be something that
with Kate Blanchett.
I can't recall now because I
the conductor.
Yeah. What's his name? It's he who is the conductor. Yeah.
Okay, I'll have a look. She did one where she was the conductor, and I haven't watched that yet. I should. Yeah, music movies I like. Anyway, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
It's we do go a little bit deep sometimes, don't we, Joe?
We go afield, the entire field.
Yeah.
So a bit over my head sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe that. But connect with Michael on LinkedIn. I put your jupilia.blogspot.com. Is that your main blog where you put content?
No, that's not. That's my spiritual blog.
Okay, well, that's probably a good place to.
But that's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
They'll find
pick up some of the tips around meditation that you were talking about. But find Michael on LinkedIn.
Something like that. Yeah.
And so Joe, who's our guest in a couple of weeks?
Well, I've got John Dykes coming on the show. So John Dykes of EPL and ESPN fame. He is on his own journey. We'll talk a little bit about that. But yeah, he's going to be joining us on our next show. So brave of him to say yes, but I think we'll have a great show.
And I think Tim should be back. He's doing some sport or something today with his church. I think that's what he said. But anyway, yeah. All right. So thanks, Michael. Thanks everyone for checking in. We've had some great comments, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. All right.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay.